Okay, we are back for our second segment with Deb Lee Smith from More Than You See. And today we are going to kind of talk about an initial ground laying of our mental health capacities. So I'm going to hand it over to Deb as we kind of get associated with all the things we need to deal with right
now. Yeah. I mean, first of all, Sam, I have to say, like, obviously we are all going through this pandemic, and I think there was a lot of articles in the beginning that were like recognizing that that we're all in mourning, that this is all like an actual like life-changing event that we were all going through, and that is certainly stopped because media always goes in waves. And I think that it's important to recognize, number one, that we are still going through this huge life-changing experience, and recognizing that it's okay for however you're feeling, because this is it's changing all of our lives, and we all have such differing experiences where it comes to acting and then just life, and I think that it's perfectly okay to recognize that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's hard to acknowledge trauma while you're in trauma. It feels like you can't do both.
Right, for sure. I think that there's definitely some like validity, again, to probably like the actual brain chemicals with that. I mean, I have to say, like, one thing that has helped me so much with my own mental health is I listen to podcasts and read books all the time about our brain chemistry and how it relates to who we are as people, as well as books about like where we're going in mental health space, as well as where we're going just as people. Like, for example, the author of Homo Sapiens, Homo Deus, the second book, he talks about in there about how in the future we're going to have apps on our phones that recognize that we are like that will have like a geo-tracking on us, and it's like, okay, you're entering the conference room space, which is often the space where you go have meetings with your boss, and it is recognizing that right now your cortisol levels are higher because you're stressed, and your insulin levels are lower because you didn't eat breakfast this morning. And so it's going to warn you, like, hey, the last time that your insulin levels were like this and your cortisol levels were like this, you yelled at your boss and almost got fired. So be careful.
That's like, crazy.
Isn't that crazy? Like, yeah. I have to say, like, I know my mom and, my parents' generation, like, they're always like so freaked out about apps and, like how it's tracking us and all that sort of stuff. And while I completely recognize that, and I completely recognize that they're stealing all of our souls, I'm also so genuinely excited about this stuff, because I think that, like, I mean, also just like as an actor, I'm so curious about these mental states that we put ourselves in, and how that relates to us as people, and all of that sort of stuff. Like, yeah. I just had the privilege of producing a film with Anna Camp, who stars in it, and it just came out in June, and a question that she keeps being asked in press is how she was able to let go of that character, because she plays a woman with terminal cancer who is making the difficult decision to end her life using the Death with Dignity Act in Oregon. Oh. And so it's a very controversial topic, but it's also, it's an incredibly important movie. I'm very proud of it, but watching her have to perform at such an incredibly high level and go through such intense scenes, and then shed that at the end of the day and try and just take care of herself, eat dinner, sleep, all of that sort of stuff. Like, it was, I feel incredibly blessed that I was able to watch her as a producer and watch her go through that. And I learned so much as an actor just watching how, she was able to process things. So I think that's, again, I think that while this time is so incredibly hard for us, and like, I live alone with my dog, like, I'm so stressed about the lack of community and like, all of the things. Whoop, there he is.
Speaking of.
There he is. But like, like dealing with all of that sort of stuff, but also recognizing that right now is such a beautiful time to learn about myself and to learn how I'm processing these things, like how and what that means about me and what that means about how I'm going to be able to handle something like this in the future. I just think that there's a lot of value in that.
Are there certain ways you are putting emphasis on checking in with yourself during this time? Because I think a lot of us are, we have time to journal, we have time to read all this kind of things. But like I said in the beginning, like it's hard to be like, I'm going through a lot. Or I feel like you have to compartmentalize it, almost like you said about Anna Camp in the movie. Like she felt the feelings and then she was like, and I put them on a shelf and then I go eat dinner and go home. So are there certain things that you are doing right now to keep yourself in check or extra take care of yourself?
I honestly feel like for the first time I'm actually taking care of myself.
Wow.
which is really like special. I feel like I have 5 full-time jobs even during this pandemic, and when I was not in this pandemic, my 6th was socializing all the time. And so to take that, off the table, even though I miss it so incredibly much, but like to be able to, take away driving, take away that social time, it has been so wonderful to just have time for myself. And so like I'm actually journaling every morning, which I see that you do, and I'm like, I love it.
I'm not sure what I write down half the time, but words go on paper.
Right. For sure. Yeah. So like I'm doing that. I'm just like, I have a really beautiful backyard, which I've worked really hard on. And I'm very lucky because I live like up in the hills of Glendale. So I found like a tiny little house with a little backyard. And my dog loves it and I love it. And I love just like being outside, being in nature. And I think that, again, tying it back to like how that actually relates to our brain and how that, like why that actually makes us feel better is, being out in nature, grounding yourself in nature, like actually lowers your anxiety and stress levels. I think that it's really important to always remember that like we are apes. Like that is where we came from, is we were monkeys. And so their like innate living space is nature. And, we were not built to like be in cars and drive 80 miles an hour down a freeway. Like we were not made to live in these spaces, like I think that it's really important to recognize that and to recognize that sometimes we just need to go back to basic human needs, which is like food, shelter, water. And some of that is just like going outside, putting our feet in nature, grounding yourself, and just like, getting the earth.
Are there ways to ground yourself when you live in like, I don't know, let's say the middle of Hollywood?
Honestly, I would recommend that you try, if you like go for a walk around the block, just if you're comfortable, go to grass somewhere and take your shoes off, because it's really important to feel the earth without shoes on. But if you're not comfortable with that, just go to a tree and just like put your hand on a tree, take 3 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just like ground yourself in that way. And I think one thing that I found so fascinating that I learned recently is like one of the reasons that it's important to breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth is the fact that your nose actually acts like a filter. Like that's what all the little hairs and stuff are, is it's basically a filter. So when you breathe in through your nose, you're actually expelling toxins. So some of the toxic chemicals that we have in LA will not be like, breathed in if you breathe in through your nose. And so that's why, yogi practices and all that sort of stuff, they have that like breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, or just breathe in and out through your nose. And that's because of that filtering, and it sort of allows you to like have the cleanest air possible.
Great. Okay, cool. Okay, so we have some grounding, we have some breathing, maybe a little bit of morning words on paper in some way or another. I feel like journaling sounds, I'm just going to say words on paper because who knows? Is there anything else you're doing? Are you tracking your moods or anything like that to like keep in touch with yourself?
I have the Calm app,
Okay.
which the meditation app, which does have a mood check-in for me. Like I have it set so that it checks in with me at 10 a.m. every morning, because I know personally for me that like if I've started my day well, then my day will probably turn out okay. If I don't start my day on the right foot, then that sort of derails my entire day. So I know for me, that's like a very important time. But it could be depending upon, what someone else does. And I think, one thing that's so important, I think, with mental health and with any of this stuff is try out like everything, like try things and then see what sticks. One thing that I read once where someone was like, oh, I've got like a very strict morning and evening routine, and I've tried that and it does not work for me. Like I suck at like sticking to something specific like that. And so now on my fridge, I will have like 5 things that I want to do in the evening and in the morning, and I will choose at least one of them. So like some days I'll choose 4 or 5, but most days I'm like, I'm gonna do 2 of those, and at least I did those 2, because then it just gives you a feeling of like accomplishment and like I did this thing, and that's good enough. Yeah. I think that that's really important as actors. Like we need to recognize that like whatever you've done today, whatever you can do, it's good enough, because that I think is something we struggle with a lot, is like always wanting to excel, always wanting to be better and better. And like I get that's so hard, but it's also just so important to like recognize the little wins, even if that means like I went outside and hugged a tree for 5 seconds. Like
I think that's great. It's so funny. I just had an actress named Sidani Smith on the podcast, and she called it her morning menu.
Yeah.
She said the same thing when I have to meditate and then journal and then read, and then this, she'd get so worked up that she didn't have time for things.
Right.
And so making it a menu instead kind of gave her some freedom to function in that. And then she was able to figure out what it exactly was that made her better or had a better day, or kind of narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Okay, cool. Well, guys, we will be back and we will be chatting a little bit about what it feels like being left behind in our acting careers. So stay tuned.